Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I've got a great guest who's joining us from the US. He'll tell us all about himself in a moment. It's very kind of him to get up as early as he has and pretend he's awake. I'm sure he's had tons of coffee to help him along somehow.
Cheers.
It's first thing in the morning for him. And before we jump into it and talk to Michael Menard, I just want to remind you that you can leave questions and messages for us. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe. I think there's a bell or something like that you press and leave comments. Let me know what you think of it, good, bad, or ugly. I'm really welcome all commentary. If you're watching on other platforms, do like and maybe share, repost, etc. All that helps. And it helps with our mission, which is to get good information out there about mental health issues to the public. Um, that's enough of me. Michael, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. It's just gone 7 where you are, isn't it, in the morning?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's
How
fine.
are you feeling?
I'm
You all
best.
right?
I'm best in the morning.
Are you? Okay. Bit
Yeah.
like me. By 3 in the afternoon, I'm like,
Oh
"Hmm,
yeah.
I need to
Yeah.
sleep now."
Yeah. Wait till you get
Where,
old.
yeah, where are you based, Michael?
I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee, right
Yeah.
pretty much in the center of the U.S.
Yeah, yeah. I've been through Nashville. It's very beautiful.
Mm.
And it's I've been to a treatment service up there that I think you have heard of. Is Nashville where you grew up? Is that
I grew up about an hour south of Chicago, a small town named Kankakee, a
yeah,
very small, poor farm town.
okay. And your family have a farming background or an industrial
No, no,
background?
we lived in the city. My father was a factory worker, but generations have grown up there from the
Yeah.
Menards.
I always think of Chicago as a very industrial city. It's
It is. It is the whole that whole, the whole Midwest. Now it's called the Rust Belt, but yeah, that is a lot of manufacturing, a lot of blue collar jobs. Yeah.
sure. And that was your family's background. That's what your father did and your siblings and so on.
Yes. Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
it a large family? A sort of like I'm thinking there's a lot of Irish connections up there,
Off
isn't
the
there?
charts, off the charts. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I'm one of 14
Right.
children, all from the same parents. I'm the second oldest. Um, unusual size, even for that town, for
Yeah.
that period, which I was born in 1951.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of Catholics, a lot of no birth control. And my mother was different. A lot of people have large families out of ignorance. She had it out of love. She loved children, and she was
Mm.
an awesome mother. But um, we lived below the poverty line.
Yeah.
We grew up in a home that was 900 square feet for 16 people.
Wow.
We had we had a combination of trauma that was my father was shaped by his own trauma.
Sure.
I'm sure you know, but the audience may not know that childhood trauma is a generational thing. It's the gift that keeps taking. If you experience childhood trauma, you have an 87% chance that you will exert trauma on your children if you
Mm.
haven't been made aware of the destruction that it causes in the family. So
Yeah.
very interesting. It helped and it hurt. I became extremely self-sufficient at a young age. I made the decision that it was up to me. I had to take care of myself.
Yeah.
It made me tough. It made me resilient, which is not all bad. But also, some of my brothers and sisters were crushed under that weight
Yeah.
of the whole family situation. And I'm still intrigued, still studying, researching of within the same DNA pool, why do we have such a diversity of outcomes from childhood trauma?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm going
And
to
I,
go back a little bit, and just so that gives people some information about this sort of stuff. So, what we're talking about here, well, what you're talking about really, and just give people terminology of things. Trauma has what's called an epigenetic effect. It rewrites our genetic code, and that's how it can be inherited. And various studies have shown this now. There was a famous one which showed two pregnant rats. And there's a bit of the brain called the amygdala, which encodes this sort of stuff. And it's the bit of the brain that deals with fight, flight, freeze, so threat assessment. So if you expose an amygdala in a child to something, it encodes it simply because um, Mother Nature has figured out that genetically giving the information makes a lot more sense than waiting till a child's born, old enough to understand language, and then explain all the threats to them. So it just encodes it and says, here, have this information. Whether that information is useful or not, these are the types of things that we're seeing now in terms of sort of neuroscience research and research in children. But as you say, because it's epigenetic, or I said epigenetic, but as you say, it's not deterministic, that actually you can mitigate against the risk of it being passed on, uh, partly, as you say, through insight. So I just wanted to give people that information. So it's not inevitable, but the more we know about this stuff and the more we talk to, more we know about our own history and the more we can share appropriately with our own children, the more we are developing what's called protective factors from inheritance. And like as an adult, if we learn about this stuff, we can change our behaviors so we don't repeat. And if we explain to our children, they can then understand why they have what for them are sort of strange things inside their head that they don't quite understand. So just for that information, is that okay, Michael? Does that chime with your understanding of
yes,
this?
it does. Yes, it does. Perfect. Your knowledge is unusual. I just want to say that to the audience because there's very little awareness of what you just said.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. That's kind. It maybe is. Um, we're going to get into this. Let's get into that statement another time. So
Sure.
later on, we're going to talk about your experience of sort of mental health services and where that statement comes from. I know it does, rather than go down that rabbit hole just yet. So you had classic what would be called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We know a lot about ACEs. I presume you know the term.
I do.
Um,
I know it well. Yeah.
and untreated ACEs again are things that predict negative outcomes in adult life. And it's a really simple tool, ACEs. People can check them out. Adverse childhood experiences, and in fact, there's a big movement to try and get GPs, medical doctors, to have just a checklist of these things, and they'll find that many of the repeat patients that have one illness after another, after another, after another that they treat, and then they come back. They can do a simple ACEs score and then go, you're not. That's what it is. Your body is responding to these adverse childhood experiences. Here, have a psychologist, and we'll sort you out that way, and it improves people's health. So, all of this, you're nodding away. So, what are, you had poverty, a large family, you had inherited trauma. What other might you point to as sort of distressing things, if you like, that led to this eventual diagnosis of complex childhood trauma or complex PTSD?
Yeah. It the my environment. I mean, the environment we grew up in, we believe is what we call normal.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
so so yeah, I had no idea what was happening, and most people don't understand what is happening and the toll it will take on your well, your whole being, your mind, your body,
yeah.
your interaction with other people, and even your spirituality. So, you know, I was in this petri dish, so to speak, of 16 people, and I decided, 60 years later, when I turned 70, I decided to write this story about my childhood only because I thought it was wildly interesting. My life, my accomplishments, things that I did that when people hear these stories, they are they are so taken back that they want more. But what I did is I never told the sad stories. I just told the funny stories.
Yeah.
And when I wrote the my memoir, I enlisted a team actually of mental health professionals to make sure I wasn't saying anything triggering to the reader.
Yeah.
But I also want to understand for myself and my siblings what happened. Why does this happen? And I thought once I got the diagnosis that it's a minority of people. And it was just bad luck for me, kind of being born into that environment and that very tragic combination of poverty, ignorance, violence, and classic trauma.
Yeah.
So the ACEs, I don't want to run through them, but they include neglect, abuse. So, I went hungry many days. Um, my dad he had a PhD in violence.
Yeah.
He raised his sons to be fighting machines.
Mm.
His father would bring him into bars and pit him against other fathers' sons. And if a bare knuckle fight, and if my dad would win, his father would get a free beer, and the fighter would get a root beer.
Mm.
And so it's like cockfighting.
Yeah.
And that's just a horrible, horrible. And he trained us to do the same thing. And he taught us that in a fight, you don't stop until the opponent is unconscious. Not that you've won. You want to make sure he will never fight you again. So and he was an excellent. He was the number prize fighter for the U.S. Navy.
So,
So he had skill, he had strength, he had anger. So we grew up, and some of the trauma my brothers are suffering from was the damage they exerted on other people.
yeah.
Right? That's horrible. It's just a
Yeah.
horrible thing. So um, I managed through life, but found this awareness at 70. And when I wrote the memoir, the world was breaking my door down, wanting to talk to me,
Sure.
wanting
I
help
can
from me,
imagine. I can
wanting
imagine.
help from me. And,
I'm going to
and
get to this memoir in a second, but I want to go back a little bit because I think it's important for people to understand that from this inauspicious beginning, you did have a very, in many ways, successful life. You didn't go off and become a gangster and end up in prison, or I don't know about any sort of substance misuse history. I'm sure you had some issues around alcohol or something like that, but you went on to have a very successful career and you were a very successful man. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did and how you
sure,
survived?
sure. I was, the grit that was built as a childhood adds resilience. It breeds creativity. So I'm finding, we bifurcate. We take one of two paths if we
Hmm.
are a result of trauma. We either use it as rocket fuel for success,
Yeah.
which is its own disease.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
its own disease,
Yeah. Yeah.
or we turn to destructive ways. And this
And
whole
some
thing.
do a combination of both, and some do a
Some do
combination of destruction and failure, destruction and success, which is, I guess, what you're saying, right?
exactly, yeah. So I had an idea when I was 18 years old, based out of necessity, for a disposable infant diaper, and this was 1968.
Right.
So I made a couple because my brother soiled me. I was holding him. I was number two. He was number 14, number 13. He soiled me 4 times in a row. I was babysitting, so I thought this is rubbish. I made a temporary diaper out of paper towels,
Right.
and then I even glued some rubber bands to make elastic leg, kind of like rubber panties that they used to use. So I showed it to my father. He smelt money,
Yeah.
brought me to a lawyer. We filed the patent. And then I wrote letters to three baby product experts. So I was 18 writing letters to CEOs. One CEO, the CEO of Johnson and Johnson,
Mm.
asked for an immediate meeting, flew me into headquarters, and here I was, an 18-year-old presenting a product, and they bought the rights to the patent, paid me an absurd amount of money, and gave me a job as a mechanical engineer in the center of a research center because they thought I was a genius. Well, if you give somebody the resources and treat them
They
like
will be a genius. That's
you're
right.
going to be a genius. Yeah, you're going to be a
Absolutely.
genius.
That's right.
So I began a very prolific year. I just said, give me your problems. Tell me what the biggest problems are in your products, and I'll solve those problems. And I was very cocky, very confident.
Yeah.
So I got my first patent for baby diapers. Today, baby diapers generate $30 billion in
I'm
revenue.
sure. I have no doubt about it.
And so then they were the leaders in sanitary napkins
Yeah.
in the world at that time. And I found they gave me the research that 40% of women while menstruating will experience some type of stain on their undergarment or on their outer garment. So I studied it. I mean, physically, I hired female models to allow me to
Mhm.
lay on the floor and they'd walk over me so I could see what happens in the crotch. And I invented sanitary napkins with wings,
Hmm.
which if you're a man, you're probably not going to know what that means, but
I
they're
think I know what it means. I've never tried one, but
yeah,
I've
good,
heard
good
of
move.
them.
Good move. So I became a machine of innovation, and it accelerated my career.
Hmm.
And they paid me to go to night school. I got a degree in business because they thought I don't need any technical. I have all these gifts, which I really didn't have. I just had an idea for a diaper. And so I ended up being the chief technical officer for the largest healthcare company in the world.
So,
I had my own jet. I traveled anywhere in the world. I was responsible for operations in 50 countries, had a great life, had five daughters. Um, Figured on very early on that the trauma was going to stop with me. So my daughters have zero aces.
great.
Um, and,
Good
you know,
job, Michael.
thank you. Yeah,
That's
thank you.
probably the most impressive thing you've told me so far. It's so easy,
Yeah.
particularly from a brutalized background, to become brutalizing, and to stop that is very impressive.
Yeah. A couple of my brothers had, which is a symptom of childhood trauma, they had early pregnancies.
Yeah,
And they had three or four children before they were 20.
yeah,
Don't know how to raise a child like that. They don't know what to do. But
yeah,
yeah, I look at those children, my nieces and nephews, and the destruction that came into their lives now in their 40s and 50s.
yeah,
And it's such a sign of the dose response of trauma.
yeah.
So this towards the end of my corporate career, I decided to write my memoir. We turned to, kind of helping the world, being wise and just did it for my relatives really and didn't expect it to take off, but it took off.
Mm.
And I don't know where you want me to kind of stop, but
Keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. Don't you worry. Carry
yeah,
on.
okay. So I just did it for fun, and my wife Emily was extremely supportive. By the way, one of
Did
the
she know about this stuff, or was the Book of Revelation to her?
she knew about it, she heard about it, she was actually a automatic healer. The
One of those.
greatest
Okay, right.
the
Yeah,
greatest contribution. She had zero aces, but
yeah.
she understood my life. And to this day, she still mitigates that through love, which is the greatest healing sauce for anyone who suffered.
Yeah,
So
stable, loving attachment is the
it's
most important.
everything. And we as adults, we need attachment our whole life. It
Absolutely.
doesn't end at childhood.
Absolutely.
It doesn't
Absolutely.
end at
One
childhood.
of the saddest things about difficult childhoods is that people learn a pattern of attachment which is unhealthy, and then they repeat that pattern, repeat that pattern. And so for anybody who's listening, if you're thinking, oh, I'm desperate, it's like just learn how to attach in a stable, loving way to another person. That will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. That's
Yeah, yeah,
just do that. It'll do the work for you. The
yeah.
rest of it, it'll come, but that's the most
Yeah.
important thing, I think.
So people were reaching out, and I was overwhelmed by the response, and I partnered with a really a global expert on childhood trauma, Dr. Schiraldi, to help me kind of what should I say, what should I not say, what
Yeah.
resources, and so I got good at guiding people to healing. But what I heard loud and clear, and what I want your viewers, your listeners to know is that you're not alone.
Mm.
Everyone who is suffering, the greatest suffering comes from a belief that you're alone. And that drives a whole nother set of dysfunction and sadness and shame.
Yeah.
So when people find out that I survived and some of my siblings didn't. They have the same exact experience
Yeah.
and sharing. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my. So I went into a period. I call it going underground, meaning I don't talk to anybody, I don't do anything, I don't work. I don't, my wife knows when I'm underground and just brings me food and soothes me.
Sure.
And I get fixated on something. I've done that my whole life.
Yeah.
And I found wrote the memoir and then wrote a second book, which is coming out in March, Greater Than Gravity, which is hitting the alarm button because what I found, I have now irrefutable data that childhood trauma is the number one cause of death in the United States.
Yeah.
It's the number one cause of addiction at a very high degree.
Yeah.
It's the number one cause of suicide and incarceration. It's costing America $14 trillion a year, which is greater than our defense budget. We don't even know it. No one has added up those numbers.
Yeah.
It's corporations are bleeding profits because of the dysfunction that comes from 70% of the adults in America who have experienced ACEs. 70, that means there's only 30 of us. And if you put two people together, there's a 91% probability that one of those have experienced childhood trauma and it will exert dysfunction onto the partner.
Yeah.
So it's really everybody. And we
Also,
don't,
I mean, there are specific factors. I mean, the figures in America are, I know, really quite extreme, but there are similarities in other countries as well. And when we talk about childhood trauma, just want to remind people we're not necessarily saying direct experience of trauma in a child, but it may well be inherited or it may well be both. And
yes,
so we're talking about intergenerational issues as well. And when we think about it in those terms, it begins to make sense. But we are like talking about America, American figures, but I would caution people to think, oh, that's just America. It isn't just America. The trauma as a driving force for ill health and problems is becoming more and more recognized. So it was the Institute of Psychiatry, I think, just prior to the pandemic here in the UK, produced research that showed 87% of people with schizophrenia reported this type of trauma. And either from experiences as a child or experiences once they'd had a rupture in their sort of mental functioning, etc. So it is there across the board. And also, certainly, there's a very strong link now between addiction and trauma, in that it's now thought that what happens with addiction is there are two, as you said, there are two main ways that people might respond to inherited or actual experience of trauma in childhood. One is to go incredibly self-destructive, and more the depressive, dangerous depressive route. The other route is more the addictive, obsessive route.
yes.
And the thinking is addiction, obsessive is an attempt to avoid the depressive, destructive route. And that actually, when you put in that framing, it sort of makes sense. That's why people would be so obsessive with something. And it should be understood that these substances, they are hijacking neurological pathways that are about survival. And that's when we look at it, we go, that's crazy. But actually, for the person experiencing it, they think they're saving their life. That's what's going on.
Medicine. It's medicine.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, we're built for pleasure. We're built for peace and calm.
Yeah.
You disrupt that, you're going to find ways to try to replicate it. And when you say addiction, you think drugs and IV and cocaine and opiate.
Yeah.
No, it's all types of addictions.
Yeah.
With children, it starts with obesity.
Yeah.
So
Well, sugar is one of the first medicators, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You'll often see very high levels of sugar use in highly traumatized families. It's the first way to pacify your child.
Which, not to go off, one of the things I learned that is shocking that is I think new to the world is that things like sugar, things like stress hormones, cortisol, when they flow in excess, the first thing they do is destroy the mitochondria, which is the engine, the energy of the cell, right?
Yeah.
We learned that in seventh grade chemistry.
Yeah.
That creates physical disorders, mild or severe,
Yeah.
mental disorders, to mild to severe.
Yeah.
And now the research shows that when you have, when the mitochondria in the brain is destroyed and you get the first thing are symptoms of mental illness, your body creates pathways for metabolic disease.
Yeah.
And we don't know exactly why yet, but it's fact that that
Yeah.
happens and it becomes a downward spiral.
Yeah.
And then you do other things that are worse for you that like sleeplessness creates more cortisol
Yeah.
and it just is a downward spiral. And that's why people
Yeah.
get to the point of being and feeling hopeless.
Yeah.
And
And
that,
one of the best ways to lose fat is to have a good sleep hygiene.
yeah, yeah,
Because then
shocking,
then your body begins to work properly. So
shocking.
you've obviously done the research and you've had the help of these experts. But one of the things that happened, which is interesting, I think, is that you did this research, you produced this book, and you began to produce this research showing how much childhood trauma is impacting on the US, and yet so little is known of that fact, but also about how childhood trauma is shaping people. This is the sort of stuff that you've been finding out. Is that correct?
Yes, and I want to be clear. I think you know, but I just want to be clear that I have no mental health professional education. So
Yeah,
I'm not a healer. I'm not a coach. I'm a, I think of myself now as an investigative reporter. And I have a brain that works by connecting dots that most people don't connect.
yeah.
And
You
then
invented the nappy, so there you go. It started early, right?
right,
You
right,
connected some
right,
dots there
right.
relatively successfully.
Right. And I have this quote in my mind. I don't even know where it came from, but I've lived with it and lived by it for about 20 years. And that quote is, each of us are responsible for the evil we are aware of, and we do not stop.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I have this burden now of knowledge that I was mourning, literally mourning and crying for my siblings for about 6 months. And then when I found out the prevalence, now I weep for the world.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's worse in the United States. I know how much worse it is, but it's still bad. As an example, there's a 70% prevalence of childhood trauma in adults in America. There's 50% in the UK.
yeah.
It's
I,
not as bad, but still, it's half of the people.
yeah,
You're still experiencing, you know, um, dysfunction, unhappiness, economic toll,
yeah.
and that's pretty much the story for every country.
Yeah, and I would agree that except in specialist areas of work, that the understanding of the prevalence of this stuff is minimal at best.
It's
And also often denied, I think, by media pundits who
it's
will, for example, we're seeing, I think this generation of young people are fantastically exciting. I think they're inspirational
yeah.
in that they are embracing these ideas and beginning to say, no, there's something's wrong. I need to do something about it. And they're being attacked by men who look like me on the media. And it enrages me that they are being insulted and put down when actually they're trying to do something which I think is an absolute revolution, which is make the world a better place psychologically.
Yeah, amen. Yeah.
So you getting some pushback and backlash, I imagine, from
Well,
you're a
it's
truth teller and people are going, I don't like the truth.
well, here's the phenomenon. First of all, when I decided to dedicate my life to this,
Yeah,
I thought, in business sense, I have no competition.
that's quite.
I have no one.
I don't have to worry about the corporate image on this one.
How big is the market? It's huge.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, what's it going to take to make a difference? It won't be much. It won't take much,
yeah,
and I will have no one coming against me.
yeah,
I thought I was going to live in an ideal world, and everyone's going to hold my hand and say, "Okay, I'm ready to help." It's the opposite.
yeah,
First of all, the reality is only about 2% of healers understand what you do know. So that when you talk about what happens in the body, very, very few, only 2% of the professionals in the United States have knowledge of this. I spoke to a group of 160 psychology and psychiatry professors at the University of Texas.
mhm,
I asked them to raise their hand if they had ever had a course on the neurobiology of the victim, a childhood victim, childhood trauma victim.
Yeah.
Zero hands went up.
It's just
When I
disturbing.
when I
I
shared
find
with
that
them,
disturbing, to be honest. I really do.
yeah, when I mean I'm just it blows my mind, but I have, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to, and the generations following me are going to fix it. But I had a podcast yesterday with a quite famous psychiatrist who was intrigued by the book Greater Than Gravity and wanted to dive into it. Well, actually, she wanted to discredit me
Okay.
and challenge everything I had, and she was ignorant. She was just ignorant.
Mhm.
And so she basically said, "Well, it's really not as bad as you say." And I'm listening, and she said, "I want the readers to know that he's a special case." And why don't you tell us your story, Michael? And I said, first of all, doctor, you are so far off. You are so wrong that we can stop the podcast now because we're going to do nothing except disagree. And I'm not going to back down.
Mhm.
And you're going to like what I have to say. So do you want to continue? She said, yes. So
Good for her. Good for her.
good
Well
for
done.
her. Good for her. And at the end of the talk, I just said, I just said, and I've learned this from this tragic Charlie Kirk
Yeah.
assassination. I love the word now, prove me wrong. So my book, Greater Than Gravity, is filled with about 350 research reports, references. I said, here's the data. Show me, tell me that I'm wrong. I said, let me tell you why you're so defensive. I said, you've been treating patients for 40 years and you have been negligent. You don't know how to heal a person. So when you are treated by them for childhood trauma, they go away feeling worse than when you came because you don't know the interventions that actually mitigate and change the brain chemistry. And it's quite well known and quite simple
Yeah.
with a handful of interventions. I said, you've never even heard of them.
Yeah.
So, I hope your readers don't walk away because when they know something's wrong and they feel something's wrong, my message is find out what it is.
I
Open up
think
to
that's
it.
right. I mean, I think that there is something about, and I was watching some videos, short form videos by Paris Hilton earlier today. They just came up on my feed. And
Oh,
Paris is a really interesting person. You wouldn't imagine that she'd had any troubles or difficulties in life, but of course she had a lot.
of course.
Um, and she was, sent to the troubled teen industry and all that sort of stuff. And she's quite an advocate now for speaking up for victims. I'm sure you know. Um,
Yes.
and there is something about how, as a society, we don't seem to want to listen to the voices of people who have this lived experience, or we don't want to give it the seriousness and gravity that it should be given, and to understand it, particularly if it's going to ask us to do a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Even though, when we look at the history of everything, the whole of human history, paradigm shifts are literally what have saved our ass every single time, right?
Yes,
Right back to Galileo.
I agree.
Do you know what I
I,
mean? That's the
yes.
first paradigm shift that produced all of this.
Yeah.
Without it, we'd still be sort of clubbing each other, So there is a resistance, I guess, to it. And now I'm not saying that people should just swallow it whole. The work needs to be done, but there is something about why is it we are resistant to these messages of truth. Now, whether there are actually 70% or 65% or 85% is neither here
Biggest
nor
thing.
there. What we
Biggest
know
thing.
what
Yeah.
we know is there's a significant problem, and why is it being ignored? And also, why is it being denied? So, why do you think it's being denied? And I don't really I'd like your opinion, your feeling about it.
Well, I have I've thought a lot about it. I've researched it. I've written on it. Um, our bodies have a state or a condition called homeostasis,
Yeah,
which is a need to bring things back to steady state,
yeah.
to the way they're supposed to be. I think we have a psychological homeostasis.
Well, without a doubt, we do, and systems as well, in terms of
Yeah,
systems
yeah.
theory.
So I spent about 20 years driving corporate transformations, which is the same thing as trying to shift a paradigm.
Right. So you're a change agent and you
I would
understand.
change, and so I
Absolutely.
understand that we
Yeah.
resist change, even though we don't understand why we resist it. Even if it's a good change, we resist it.
Let me just explain the concept of homeostasis. It's very important. I think it's absolutely central in this. I really do. So, homeostasis is this idea that there's some sort of regulator in our bodies, but also more importantly, in this context, within our social interactions, which is set at a certain level. The way to think about it, the way I explain it to people is we think of a heating system in a home, we have a thermostat, and the heating system works towards the temperature that thermostat is set at. And you can play about with the heating, various bits of the heating system. But if the thermostat stays at that temperature, it's always going to want to go back to that temperature. And to affect real change in that system, you've got to find the thermostat and change that thermostat. And if you don't do that, it'll always go back. It'll always work towards that. So,
Perfect example.
yeah.
Perfect example. Yeah.
Okay. So that's
I'm
the
gonna
sort of
say
how I
that.
explain it. And so we will go to dysfunction simply because we haven't found the thermostat and changed it. And I guess that's something about what you're saying, right?
Exactly. And I'm gonna use that note.
Oh, welcome. It's not mine. I stole
Great
it from a
visual.
book. Yeah.
It's a great visual. And um, I will forever be disappointed, sad, um, that those who had the knowledge didn't do what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and what is it? I think the big driver is anybody who's going to do something about it has either been a victim or has been a perpetrator.
Yes.
And and
Yeah.
so why do they want to open that Pandora's box?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Um,
So the victims learn the shame message and stay away unless
yeah,
they processed it. And the
yes,
perpetrators have an investment in it. That's the sort of,
yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
And we
And
see that written large at the moment with the sort of Epstein stuff, where we've got some very courageous people breaking that cycle, one of whom ended up killing herself because this is what happens, right? And that's a big cost for somebody,
yeah,
isn't it,
yeah,
really?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, anyone who wants to disprove or minimize my data, my message, my energy, I to myself put them in the category of just being either ignorant or evil.
Yeah.
And it's that's what we're up against. When you talk about driving the change, it's going to take generations. Um, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've written this book, it's called Greater Than Gravity,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
and it's looking at all the research and what we understand about the prevalence and the consequences of childhood trauma, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, what would you say in terms of your own experience of growth and development? Would you be able to sort of share some of the things that you think were seminal um, incidents, treatments, events, relationships that have led you to be able to manage yours more effectively and get to this point
Yeah.
where you can be an advocate? What's worked for you?
I could only answer that after I had the awareness at age 70, about 5 years ago. So
Yeah.
what I asked myself that question, what were the tools? What were the strategies? Well, the first is an awareness, a self-awareness at a very young age that it's up to me. That's number one. Number two, self-awareness that that stuff was wrong. It wasn't just unfortunate, it was wrong.
Yeah.
And I had to take that into my head. So I developed a resilience age that at an early age that helped me throughout. But I managed my dopamine, my need for wellness, my need for goodness. I managed it with things that were healthy. And that was, I don't know if it was just God guiding me, helping me. I don't know. I turned to learning and performing classical music. I
Oh,
play
wow. Yes, that would work.
my brothers turned to alcohol and drugs
Yeah.
for
And that
that.
doesn't work.
It works for a while, and then you die.
Yeah.
Um, And so I learned a couple of things. I learned that music soothes me. And so I did it more,
Yeah,
right? I did
yeah,
it more. I learned that swimming in blue water, in oceans, or clear lakes gave me a sense of well-being. So I did it more. I
no, the
learned,
saying salt water cures all, either tears or the sea.
yeah, there you go. There you go. I learned to be extremely direct.
Yeah,
So I'm considerate, I'm kind,
yeah,
but I'm extremely direct. Um, and there's freedom in that. There's freedom in that.
yeah.
Why do men? I mean, I think you're more knowledgeable on the subject than most people in the UK. Why is there 17% for men with suicide and only 5% for women?
Yeah.
What is it? We are closed. We are closed. And so I wasn't closed. The other thing is that I had a loving partner who, I give you an example. When she heard, one of the stories of my memoir is that I had to try out for baseball.
Mm.
I was 12 years old. It was called Little League. And every boy wants to play baseball. So I went for tryouts and I thought they gave you a glove. But no, you have to bring your own baseball glove. I didn't have a glove. So the coaches made me try out without a glove. So I was having to catch barehanded
That would have helped. Yeah,
hot drives, and they did it for cruelty.
yeah.
They did it, and I remember that shaming and that horrible experience. And of course, I didn't make the team. When my wife heard that story, I was about 28, 29.
Yeah.
My next birthday, she gave me a baseball glove, a
Yeah.
beautiful Rawlings baseball glove that brought such joy. It's hard to describe. I've not used it, but I got to put it on. I got to break it in. There's a process for a boy where you break the ball in by rubbing oil on it, putting it in the oven. It's just, and that was such a gap in my life that that drove.
You could reparent that
That's
hurt inner
exactly what it was.
child that has been shamed.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly what it
Beautiful.
was.
Beautiful.
And her heart and her love and
But
caring for
also, it's a really smart woman because she gave you the resource to heal that child. She didn't try and jump in there and do it for you.
exactly.
It was so important that you found the resilience to do that, it seems
And
to me.
her attitude, and it's unrealistic to expect that of every spouse, but hers is that I understand the hurt, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make up for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she spent her life doing that, so she's a saint, and I'm a very very blessed man to have her. So those are
And
the
I guess also having children yourself and being determined that they were not going to face this stuff, so that there was some sort of reparation there. It's almost like developing an ongoing forgiveness for yourself and for what happened to you. It's like, no, it stopped with me. I can nurture you. I'm going to learn how to do that properly. I'm going to be the person I wanted to have in my life. And then you achieve that. That's extraordinary.
yeah. So now my daughters have that mindset.
Yeah.
They are raising their children beautifully.
Yeah.
And you see that the formula works. It's
Yeah.
not magic.
Yeah.
It's how we were created and we've fallen away from it.
Yeah.
So and we're getting much worse at it, not better.
I think so. We don't have time to go into the current situation around the globe, particularly in America, but obviously there are forces that are contributing to this situation worsening. That's we can say that as a matter of fact. Uh,
Yes.
and we do need to think about it as a culture. Like for it, I've had another podcast I filmed earlier this week with an organization in the UK called Thrive, who advocate for gardening and horticulture because we know it's healing, right?
Mhm.
Because we can't train enough mental health professionals to meet this need. But what we can do is identify, as you have done, those aspects of healthy living that will do the healing for us.
Yes.
And then we advocate for that. It's
Yes.
not about pathologizing experience. It's about saying that there are better ways. Life can heal us if we organize life properly, right?
Yes. And so, we can get into it today, we can get into it in another, but the solution is what I'm most interested in.
But you're going to come back for that because we have run out of time for now.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get you back on and get Teresa to sort of sort it out. We'll have another chat about more
Awesome.
about that. But it's a really it's a you probably heard this phrase a lot and a bit tired of it, but it's a very inspirational story in a
Yeah.
genuine sense. In a
Thank
genuine
you.
sense, lots of
Yeah.
identification. I grew up in very similar circumstances myself, hence my having to search for the knowledge base to understand what was going on. So I get it. I have an inside sense of the challenges for you, and I'm very much admire what you've achieved just as a human being.
Thank you.
The nappies aside, the fact that you're such a kind man at this stage when it could have gone the other way very easily, and that's
Mm.
because you made decisions, Michael,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yes.
you've got the outcomes. Thank you for joining us. I hope, folks, I hope that you've been as moved and touched by this as I have, particularly in this time when we're seeing some men, not all men, but some men promote the more negative aspects of masculinity. To meet a guy who's been through this, who's promoting the nurturing, loving, kind aspects of masculinity is a real inspiration for me, genuine inspiration. So you stay there. Do leave comments, etc. What's the name of your book again so that people can buy it?
It's greater than gravity, how childhood trauma is pulling down humanity.
Right. And so look out for that, folks. It's out very soon. And I shall end now, and then I'll see you all at the next episode of the Wellbeing Show. So bye bye for now, folks.